Good day, everybody. Welcome to the annual general meeting of Protec for the year 2019-20. And a very warm welcome to all of you online who are watching and interacting with us. We are making history due to the pandemic that we have, and we hope that you enjoy this new format and that we're effective and efficient in delivering our reports and our annual AGM to you all. I would like to start by welcoming our two guest speakers, Fana Maruta and Mary Metcalf, who have graciously given of their time to address you on their subjects. I welcome the board. We have Stephen Datleng, myself, Mike Trulock, Barlin Mudley, the CEO. We have Professor Francis Fuller. We have Reggie Zigalala and Mr. Jones Molisane and Francois Adrian, who were board members for this year. And we appreciate them for their service and attendance at this meeting. I'd like to further welcome all the alumni who we rely on so heavily in our mentorship process and in being great examples of the success of Protec as we go forward. Welcome to Department of Education officials. Thank you so much for supporting us and being here for this occasion. We would not be able to function effectively without our funders. So a very warm welcome and thank you for attending and supporting us as funders. And then last but not least, the management and staff across the country for Protec and the running of Protec. We thank you for your efforts and being here today. To start us off, I would like to call upon our chairperson, Stephen Datleng, to welcome you all.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the 2019-2020 annual general meeting of the Program for Technological Careers. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this morning for yet again another session of our report as the organization. I'd like to particularly welcome a few people that are joining us today. And first, I'd like to welcome Mr. Fana Maruta. He is our guest speaker today in the program, and he is the president of the South African Institute of Civil Engineers. We are proud of the relationship that we have that is spanning over decades with the South African Institute of Civil Engineers, and we continue to enjoy that relationship today. And your presence as part of the session today is very much appreciated, and would like to give you a warm welcome and look forward to engaging with you during this session today. I'd also like to welcome Professor Mary Metcalf, who is currently, today she's the keynote address in our program. She's currently the executive director of an organization called PILO, and PILO is a program for to improve learning outcome. Professor Metcalf has been involved in education for many decades. By mentioning her name, you probably know immediately who we're talking about. She has been involved in education for a number of years, in fact decades, and she's been involved in government around the education space. So it's a very important figure within the education space, and we're quite blessed to actually have as part of our session today. So welcome, Professor Metcalf. I'd like to also then welcome our funders and also potential funders. And this is a very important group of people to our organization. We rely on our funders to continue existing as an organization, and this is a partnership that we take very seriously. And we would like to actually welcome and thank you for making the time to join us. Any potential funders, we hope you'll be able to see what Protec is all about today, and why there's a very good reason for you to consider funding this organization. And I hope you'll like what you see in the report that we have to deliver today. I'd also like to welcome the members of the or representatives of the Department of Education that managed to join us today. Another very important partnership, our very existence is around education and working closely with the Department of Education to deliver our mandate. And that's again another partnership that we take very seriously as one of the important pillars in our existence. And your presence here is highly appreciated, and I'd like to give a very warm welcome to our session for this year. I'd also like to welcome my fellow board members that sit on the board with me. And once again, I'd like to thank you, colleagues, for making the time to join us, and again for assisting in delivering another report of the organization. I'd like to also welcome our management and staff, both in national office, in the branches, as well as in the projects. And this is the very engine that makes this organization actually work and be able to do what it does. And I'd like to welcome this very important team of people that are part of what we're doing. And lastly, I'd like to welcome the alumni group that was able to join us today. This is the very showcase that we have of what Protec is really all about. I'm part of the alumni group myself, and proudly so. And this is really where we show precisely why Protec actually exists in terms of developing the skills that we're developing through the programs that we're doing. And our alumni is testament to that. And as a final point, and maybe as part of the process for today's session, I'd like to request that if you do have questions as you go through the session, please type them in during the webinar. We will collate all the questions, and at the end of the session, we will then provide answers to all those questions. It just makes it a bit more manageable that we go through all the questions up front, and at the very end, we'll then tackle answers to those questions. If everybody can just assist us in holding back on the questions and just send them in, and we'll deal with that on that basis. On that note, it's welcome to everybody to the 2019-2020 Protec AGM. Thank you very much.
The next order of business is to go through and look at the annual general meeting minutes for the last year. These minutes were circulated, and we'll take them as read. The meeting was held on the 26th of July 2019, and it was for the year 2018-19. We are going to ask, having read the minutes, for any corrections. If anybody would like to highlight any corrections for us, please. And then could we then move on to, with those corrections having been noted, that we please ask for a proposer and a seconder to adopt the minutes of the past AGM as a true and accurate reflection of that meeting. Could I have a proposer and seconder, please? Ladies and gentlemen, as we're aware online, we would like you to post your chats and questions in the chat box, and we will go through those and answer those at the end of the meeting. So should you have any questions on or comments to make on the last annual general meeting's minutes, please post those online so that we can tackle them later on in the meeting.
Good morning once again. As chairman of Protec, I remain very proud to still be part of this organization that has been in existence for so many years. It's quite encouraging to realize that we are 2 years away from our 40th birthday as an organization, which pretty much shows the resilience that this organization has been for the past many years. We know of a lot of organizations that have come and gone over the past 4 decades that we've actually existed. And the fact that Protec is stronger today than it was 40 years ago, or almost 40 years ago, is quite remarkable. And I think one remains very proud to continue to be part of an organization like this that continue to actually deliver performance year on year without fail. We've gone through a lot of issues in the past years, but I can tell you that in recent years, this has been a very smoothly run organization, with a board that is completely supportive of the management team, that carries its project very, very well. And I think I'm proud to have the kind of board that I'm actually working with. 2019 has not been an easy year, like any other period that we go through. Especially coming into the current period that we find ourselves now in 2020, we've had some good performances as an organization around 2019, and I think it's thanks to the work that we put in 2019 that we're able to handle the current situation that we find ourselves in the position that we find ourselves. Just a few points regarding the 2019 performance that we've gone through as an organization. Academically, which is our main mandate in terms of developing the young minds out there, it has been another proud year, and you'll hear in the CEO's report when he covers more details around performance in terms of the academic area. But it's quite encouraging to know that in our projects, we're able to manage, in fact, both in our projects and in our branches, we managed to achieve more than 99% pass rates in our matriculants, which is quite encouraging that we're maintaining that standard regardless of the climate that we find ourselves in. And with that, it's not just good results, but the quality of the results is quite encouraging as well. In the branches, we've managed to achieve just under 80% of the bachelor rate, which talks to the quality of the results that we're actually able to achieve as an organization. While in the projects, again, we managed to do just over 86% bachelor pass rate. So this really shows the level of dedication that we have through the team that's assisting us in the field, both the branch managers and their teams on the ground, as well as the project teams that are running all our projects nationally. And I'd like to take a moment to thank those people for the effort that they put in. We are blessed as an organization to have the kind of staff that we have, that is dedicated to the organization, that keeps delivering, regardless how hard the situation may be. And I can assure you that as an organization, we try very hard to provide support to our teams out there. And it's encouraging to see that the work is really coming through and showing quite nicely. So thank you very much to our teams on the ground, and to the management team that's actually delivering the performances that we keep seeing year on year. And a special thank you to our Chief Executive Officer, Palan Moodley, for running a very tight ship, and more than anything, for being able to deliver another positive financial period, which I'll touch on very shortly, which assisted us to come into the 2019 period in a very strong financial position. We are now sitting in a COVID-19 pandemic situation that nobody could have foreseen, and the impact that this has had on the organization, or in fact the entire country and the entire world, is unprecedented. However, as an organization, we came into this thing with a very strong financial position, which is as a result of the work put in 2019, which is now assisting us to actually brace this bad weather that we're going through. And hopefully, in terms of all the projections that we're looking at, we're looking at a very positive outcome out of this situation. Of course, that's not without pitfalls. The educational environment has been impacted on very, very greatly, and naturally that has an impact on our plans, and threatens survival of the kind of organizations that we have. So from a financial position, we are standing very strong thanks to the efforts that we put in over the past year, which is the current report that you'll see in the session today. And it's thanks to that effort that we're now able to weather the storm. Nobody knows what the new normal is going to be beyond COVID-19. Nobody knows what the future is holding for any country, for that matter. And for our sector in particular, it's quite challenging. We don't know what decisions are going to be made around the education sector for the rest of 2020 and what impact that is going to have. The only thing we can control is how we respond to the pandemic, and we've actually through the management team executed some very interesting responses, switching from the traditional face-to-face classroom contact to the online delivery, and that has proven to be a very well working mechanism, to the point where one might even consider maintaining that on a more long-term basis as a way of delivering what we're delivering. It has shown that we can actually deliver to more learners than we can in the traditional method. And I'm sure we can all agree that the current lockdown situation has actually brought to our attention things we never really thought about before. A different way of doing things, of doing the same things we've always done, but in a more efficient way. And we've all seen that we can be more efficient in how we do things and how we run business. So it's not business as normal, but it is what they call the new normal. And we are continuously looking at ways and means as to how to maximize our resources and to continuously respond to the challenges that we face. We recently had our strategic planning session with the board and some of the members of the team in the organization to do exactly that and to look at what the future holds and what sort of responses we need to do over the next period. And I think that's part of the future planning that we're looking at as an organization. So continuously, we always try and look at ways to improve and maximize and optimize, on what we do have in terms of resources. And I think 2019 is a classic example of that. We managed, in terms of the financial report that the CEO will be delivering later today, we managed to in the backdrop of a very challenging educational sector as well as financial sector, and especially in days where funders are becoming more and more difficult to find, it becomes important as an organization to make sure that we optimize our funds. We make the rent work for us as much as we can, and every rent that's sitting in the account to try and maximize our output. And in the backdrop of the economic pressures that we had in 2019, we did manage to somehow still achieve a 14.3% growth in our revenue, which is quite encouraging. But what's even more impressive is the fact that we managed to increase our bottom line by 210% in the same period. That is unprecedented. Yeah, and it was because of those efforts that we put in of tightening the screws and some of the experiences we've had previously around our financial processes and our financial management, that we're able to sharpen our pencil, and that allowed us to come into 2020 with a very strong financial position. Having said that, I would still like to call on our partners in terms of funders, and particularly our potential funders as well, that this is a relationship that we continuously rely on for the organization to keep working. And I'd like to thank the funders that have been with us during this period, that have seen Protec over the years. Some of the funders are quite recent, and we appreciate those new partnerships. Some are a bit longer standing, and we appreciate the resilience of those funders. The climate we find ourselves in now with the pandemic that's upon us, this has now put a lot of businesses at risk, and it's especially appreciated that the funders that we have has decided to actually stay with Protec and not to abandon the project, and that for us is very key, because at the moment each company is thinking about its own very survival, and the survival of any CSI at the moment becomes a low priority matter. And the fact that our funders have decided to stay with us means they do see the value in partnering with Protec, and that's something that we value very much. And I'd like to thank our funders for the journey that you've traveled with us up until where we are, and particularly for the support we had in 2019. And for the potential funders that are considering joining us, I welcome you and invite you to actually look at our results for the previous period, both in terms of academic results as well as our financial results. And I think you will then see the value that we put in the funders' balance sheet in terms of our CSI, in terms of their CSI spend. And I think Protec is an organization that 38 years later is still worth partnering with. We do have plans going forward. We intend to stay for another 30 years. And in 2 years' time, we hope to celebrate our 40th birthday, which really shows how strong an organization we are, and we still remain standing and a very strong competitor in our environment at the moment. And we'd like to invite all our funders and potential funders to walk this road with us. I'd like to thank the management team for the hard work that you guys keep on putting in, in terms of making sure that the projects are running smoothly, the branches get the support that they need. That is very important. I'd like to thank our staff in the branches, both the branch managers as well as support staff that are working with them. Thank you so much for the hard work that you continuously put in. And I think you need to understand that you are a very important asset to the organization. And that includes our teams in the projects, that really continue to deliver our mandate from our funders, and the project managers that are in the field tirelessly, making sure that the projects are working smoothly and are running smoothly. Our senior managers that are managing all these projects would like to acknowledge your efforts as well. The National Office Management Team, I'd like to thank you guys as well for the continued commitment that you seem to show to the organization. My fellow board members, once again, I'd like to thank you for the continued support you give to the organization. Unfortunately, Protec is not a remunerated board, but the continued commitment and dedication that we get from the board that we have is really commendable, and I'd like to thank you for that. In terms of the rest of our partners, the Department of Education, all our other partners, Telecom, which is very important to mention as one of our main funders and partners in education. I'd like to thank you guys for the partnership that we have. As chairperson of the organization, I remain available, as you know, for any issues that you may need to address with the board. And I can tell you that collectively as a board, we really value all these relationships and we take them quite seriously. And our door remains open to engaging with you on any issue that you may have. I look forward to 2020-2021 annual report, and hopefully we'll be delivering another good performance despite the situation that we're in. You see, Protec has this thing of finding a way of flying above the situation we find ourselves. And I can confidently tell you that the COVID-19 pandemic is nothing Protec cannot survive. We've already put plans in place, and we have confidence that we'll survive this period, and come 2021, we'll deliver another successful year to our shareholders. Well, we don't have shareholders, but to our partners, which are the funders and the Department of Education, and we look forward to an even longer partnership with you. On that note, I'd like to thank you very much. I will take questions if there are any at the later stage as part of the program, and we'll deal with those at that point. With that, I'd like to hand over back to the Master of Ceremonies and or the Program Director, and thank you very much. We look forward to 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for your report. At this point, I'd like to invite Barlin Woodley, the CEO, to deliver his report, and questions will be at the end. Please remember to type those into the chat box as he goes through his report. Barlin, over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first virtual AGM of Protec. It gives me indeed a great pleasure to present the annual report for 2019-2020 with special emphasis on the academic and financial year 2019. Our results bear testament to all the hard work that has gone before us. Our staff, our volunteers, our tutors, our board, our stakeholders, and a special thank you to our funders and their generosity that made all this possible. And of course, not forgetting our learners that have put in the hard work and giving rise to the results that I will be presenting today. Bearing in mind that as a non-profit organization, it's all about the impact we make in the lives of individuals that is uppermost in people's minds when one determines the success or failure of such an organization. Protec once again in 2019 demonstrated an ability to withstand some tremendous pressures from external forces, mainly the economic climate. We were able to not only see ourselves through the year and come out positive, but also see growth when many other organizations suffered as a result of the economic climate. Protec has seen a 13.7% increase in its revenue line, and that again, thank you to the generosity of our funders. Especially if one looks at a weak year that we had the preceding year, 2018, when much of our expenditure resulted from a fraud that took place in 2017 and the investigation that took place in 2018 and the acquisition of our property that gave us a deficit of 1.8 million. We turned that into a 390,000 rand surplus in 2019. And that once again shows a remarkable turnaround for the organization. During the year, we saw 5 funders that exited from Protec, but fortunately, those were once-off funders and weren't our long-term funders. But even though we lost 5 funders, we introduced 6 new funders to Protec. So we almost broke even in terms of the number of funders and achieved 41 funders by the end of 2019. I will now turn my attention to the operations, and Protec continued along its traditional path in that we deployed our programs through our branch network and through projects. Of course, once again, just to clarify, the branches are permanent and therefore we have grade 10 intakes each year and the branches continue indefinitely, whereas the projects are for a limited time, anywhere between 1 and 5 years. So during the course of 2019, we had 23 branch or projects deployed in Protec. That's a slight increase from 22 in the preceding year. The deployment strategy of branch and projects continues to work in our favor in that we have funders that would like to fund totally a project in a particular area and close to their operations. And we subsequently decided that we will continue with that deployment strategy, even though a branch network would be the preferred methodology in future. The approach has been successful in that we have a broader reach in terms of our geographic footprint as a result of the project deployment. And that has seen us, together with the branch network, deploy in 7 of the 9 provinces. And of course, we wish to, in the coming years, attain a deployment strategy that sees us in all 9 provinces. During the year 2019, we had 2,865 learners in the program, and these were across from grade 9 to grade 12, and with the main concentration being in our biggest program, which is the Telkom Foundation program, running in Tshwane West and Zwede in the Port Elizabeth area, Eastern Cape. In that program, we had a combination of grade 9 and grade 10 learners and enjoying the supplementary program for maths, science, English, and the world of work. And in all our other programs, we had learners between grade 10 and grade 12 also receiving supplementary tuition in mathematics, physical science, English, first additional language, and the world of work. This strategy, especially in the Telkom one, was our first foray into a whole school program. That means that all learners from the particular grade who belonged in the program, unlike our branch and other projects where we have a selection of learners from our feeder schools. So being the first foray, we had to change slightly our strategy in terms of an excellence program into partially a remedial program. And we have seen traction over since 2017 when we commenced this program. with grade 8 learners, we have seen continuously an improvement in the results, because what the program is trying to do is to close the prior learning gaps of these learners, because many of them, through the assessments we undertook at the start of the program, we understood some of the gaps ranged from grade 3 to grade 7. So our initial focus was to close these gaps, and by closing these gaps, create the foundation necessary for the learners to improve on their results in the grades 8 and 9. And we have already started to see that happen, and that will continue to happen as they progress through to grade 12. I now turn my attention to the group as a total, the staff and management of Protec. During the year, we've seen the exit of our GM Finance and the person heading up our telecom project, and we introduced 2 new people into the program who joined us towards the latter part of 2019. And so we had successfully closed the year with a full complement of staff. That took us into commencing 2020 with staff fully deployed in order to deliver on our strategy. Protec, whilst we have a very traditional way of deploying our programs, in that we had contact sessions with our learners through our Saturday school program and the vacation school programs. We have found it necessary for us to change that to a combination of ICT deployment in terms of online support for our learners, and together with the introduction of certain modules like robotics and the coding, so that we prepare our learners for the future. That now where we find ourselves during the COVID-19 has fast-tracked Protec to even deploy that strategy even faster, because the traditional methodology is never going to be able to be deployed as we have done successfully in the past. We have to almost look at a hybrid system where we have a combination of contact sessions with our learners and a fully fledged ICT program, which in the event that schools are closed like it was done in 2020 during the lockdown period, that we can easily transcend and move towards an online approach with our learners, and vice versa. When schools reopen, we can continue with the hybrid system. That, together with a necessity for a psychosocial element to be added into the program, so learners, even through a very, very psychologically draining situation like COVID, can receive psychological support through to the academic support through the normal program, through to preparing these learners for the future and deploying items like the robotics, coding, and the likes. So our program over the next few months and years will transition into a hybrid nature, ensuring that 1, we build flexibility into our programs, 2, we remove the boundaries like the geographical locations that we are linked to because of our contact sessions that we have with our learners, and 3, the ability to upscale and downscale at will. The deployment of an online strategy will ensure that we are able to deploy that at a moment's notice. When we were all faced with the possibility of the lockdown announced on the 26th of March 2020, we all had to very rapidly find solutions, some of them interim, to continue to support these learners. But in so doing, it gave us the ability to start thinking long term and finding a solution that will support these learners way beyond the lockdown, the COVID, and anything else that may be thrown our way in the future. You know, many people talked about COVID as they're going to be a definite end time for it. Until a vaccine is found, that end time is unknown still. So we do not know how long COVID will be around. So we have to, as an organization, ensure that we have the ability to not only support learners online, but make sure that they have the data necessary to be able to access that online content and the devices necessary to use the data and that online content, all of which are in our strategy as we move forward. I wish to congratulate our cohort of grade 12 learners in 2019 that once again have made us proud with their sterling results. We had 371 grade 12 learners achieving 434 distinctions, a 99.2% pass rate, and a 79.2% bachelor pass rate. This against a backdrop of the national averages that are way below what Protec has made possible. To them, I thank them for their hard work and once again congratulate them and wish them all the best in their academic careers going forward and their working careers in the future. Finally, I wish to once again thank my staff and the rest of the team, including the tutors, for their hard work, dedication and passion that made our financial results possible, the academic results of our learners possible, and not forgetting that the ability to have covered all aspects of our promises to our funders, to have covered all those aspects during our Saturday classes and vacation classes. To our funders, their generosity, I would like to once again thank them and ask them to remain with Protec as they can see that the investments that they've made are going a long way to assisting these learners in achieving their dreams and their goals. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have great pleasure of introducing our first guest speaker, Mr. Fana Marutla, who has graciously accepted an invitation to address you. Fana is a registered professional civil engineer. He is a professional engineer with EXA, currently president of the South African Institute of Civil Engineering, and an executive board chairman and fellow of SAICI. He has an extensive experience in engineering and currently runs or is in the role of GIBB Engineering and Architecture, including planning and analysis of railway systems from conceptual design and detail to leading multidisciplinary railway project teams. And we welcome him to talk to you today. Fana, over to you.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Fana Marutla. I am the current president of the South African Institute of Civil Engineering. I also chair the executive board of SAICI and the council. What I do on a daily basis, I am the technical executive of GIBB Engineering and Architecture, which is a consulting engineering company providing world-class engineering services in various specialist fields like roads and highways, railways, traffic and transportation, water and sanitation, human settlement, bulk infrastructure, power and energy, among others. If more information is needed, I can be approached with regard to that. I'm here to talk to Protec about my presidential theme as well, which covers topics of education, youth entrepreneurship, procurement, and ethical leadership. All of these things are underpinned by governance and ethics. It is important in our country that we prioritize education. And as I was selecting this topic last year, one could not have imagined the kind of challenges that this country was going to go through this year. I selected these 4 areas, not knowing what is coming our way this year in terms of the education sector. Not only in the education sector, but also in procurement and in leadership. Like I'm saying, I also want to focus on youth entrepreneurship. Just touching a little bit about the challenges we are facing as a country when it talks to COVID-19. I'm thinking that this can be an opportunity for us to try and use this challenge that we are going through to try and improve the way we do things as well. You have heard from the president on Sunday, where he was announcing that government will set aside about 40% of public procurement to women-owned companies. That is something that we need to start working hard on. But looking at COVID itself, something that I encourage people to look at is not only just the number of people who are infected with the virus, but also looking at what you call the case fatality rate, because that's the rate where you can also compare South Africa with other countries around the world. As things stand, if one looks at what the rate is at the moment, it's sitting at around 1.8%. So meaning that the number of people that have passed on because of COVID-19 as a percentage of the total people who are infected with the virus is sitting at 1.8%. And that is not very bad when you compare it with other countries around the world. In countries like the US, their number is about 3.2%. If you compare it with our own BRICS countries, India is about 2%, Russia is about 1.7%, and Brazil is at 3.3%. So we are relatively not too bad when it comes to that. One thing I'm also thinking about is that the government could have used this opportunity to bring policies that empower our people. Instead of focusing projects just on politicians, the government could have used the opportunity to empower communities where there is poverty. Things like the production of masks, for example. That is something that is very straightforward. It's something that can be produced by communities themselves. As I said, I'm here to talk about what Protec has done. I must, just from the outset, also just thank you for the role that we have played in our communities in the STEM fields for the last 38 years. In fact, I was speaking to a colleague of mine who was telling me that, Fana, by the way, I'm a product of Protec. This is the gentleman who was in high school in the 80s. Him and I went to the same university, same age as me. We graduated in 1997, but when I said to him, I'm going to be talking to Protec, he remembered the contribution that you have made in his own life. So thank you so much for what you have done for him. I want to emphasize this thing, and that's what I emphasize on education, that we need skills of the future. Countries which require knowledge-driven economies requires people who are doing maths and science. ICT, 4IR, and engineering that we're talking about requires us to do maths and science. If we don't do maths and science, we're going to be falling behind, and that is not something we can afford. I challenge people, by the way, that in our country we have got universities. Some of them are more than 100 years old already. I'm asking them why, at this point in time, why are we still relying on Facebook, on Twitter, on WhatsApp, on the internet and other things that are produced elsewhere in the world? Why can't we produce our own products? like Twitter, our own local Facebook, where we can actually still communicate socially. So I challenge people that we need to focus on thinking about empowering our own young people to start doing things themselves for ourselves. We can't at all times rely on what we can get from other countries around the world. We must start learning from ourselves. In fact, Professor P.L.O. Lumumba recently was saying that, in the whole of Africa, there is no one single country that is producing a cell phone. The whole 54 countries in the whole continent, none of them has produced a cell phone to date. That's the challenge that I want to put to young people, to say, why can't we work towards that? There's an attempt in Rwanda where they would like to try and produce their own cell phone, but we're still way behind when it comes to that. So we need to start relying on ourselves. You will recall from the GDP, not GDP, rather the National Development Plan, where the NDP aspires that we should be growing our economies at a level that is greater than 5% per year. So our economy ideally should be growing at a percentage that is higher than 5% per annum. That is a level where a lot of our people will be employed, a lot of poverty to some extent will be reduced, but for as long as our economic growth is less than 1%, we are still way far behind from where we want to be. National Development Plan aspires for us to achieve more than 5% by the year 2030. And by the look of things at the moment, more work must be done for us to get to such levels. So I would like to challenge all of us to start thinking about this skills of the future in the ICT, in 4IR, and in engineering. I'm going to be talking about the challenge we face as engineers in a short while. Now, looking at the Department of Basic Education, the number of people who are being admitted to universities, at the moment, if you look at the year 2019, only about 170,000 people got admission levels to the universities. But the National Development Plan was wishing that in the same year, 2019, the number of people who are being admitted to universities should have been 270,000. So the actual is 170, but the NDP plan is 270. So the plan is essentially 100,000 people behind. With the same plan, by 2030, the National Development Plan aspires for a number of people who are being admitted to universities to be 435,000. So you can see with these numbers that we are falling behind in terms of the plan that the government has for our own country. One thing also that I challenge people is about learners who are doing maths and science. If you look at the 2018-2019, the number of learners who are passing maths and science at grade 12 with more than 50%, that number is hovering only around 20%. So of all the learners who are doing maths at grade 12, those who pass maths with more than 50%, that number is hovering only around 20%. And that's not enough if we are to grow the National Development Plan to the level that we want it to. Another challenge that I would like to share with you, and I want to challenge young people to consider a career in engineering, especially women. If you look at the EXA, the Engineering Council of South Africa's annual report of 2018-2019, if you look at that database, there is about 58,000 registered professionals in their database. Of that number, only 5% of them are female in the category called professional engineers. 5% of engineers who are registered as professional engineers in this country are women. And if you look at the one that are called technologies, professionally registered technologies, that number is only 7.4%. So basically the engineers and the technologists who are registered in this country, all in all, the number is less than 10% female in this country. So that talks to the dominance of men in the field of engineering. So women are encouraged to get involved in engineering, to try and empower themselves, to try and empower our country and try and move this country forward. I did talk about earlier about what the president has announced. The president said the government is intending to set aside 40% of public procurement to women-owned companies. Now, in the engineering field, that is going to be a challenge because the number of companies that are owned by women are still very, very small. So women are encouraged to register as professional engineers, but before they can register, they need to go through the training and become engineers. So we encourage them to register in numbers in the field of engineering because at the moment, they are heavily underrepresented. So I challenge them to come on board, to come and assist the men, to come and assist our country and move it forward, to come and support these aspirations of our government. Something I want to talk about as well is the economic growth in our country. If one looks at the GDP performance from 1994 up until now in 2020 or 2019 even, you will see that the trend is going downwards. The slope is going downwards. The slope is negative. If you look at in 2006, if you look at the GDP growth in 2006, the percentage was 5.6%. 5.6% in 2006 compared to what it was last year, 2019. We're talking about 0.3% growth year on year. 5.6 2006, 0.3% in 2019. That is a massive drop if you look at the growth of our economy. Something I'm looking at as well is in relation to this is the unemployment. Statistics South Africa announced earlier this year that the unemployment is sitting at 30.1% in Q1 of 2020. Compare that with 1995 when the unemployment rate was 16.9%. So for us to be able to grow our economy, more has to be done. We need to start doing things positively. We need to start using our resources wisely for us to turn this country around. As I said, National Development Plan aspires to grow the economy at a rate of more than 3%, more than 5%. That's what we must aspire for. That is what will bring our economy and reduce the level of inequality, level of unemployment in our country. So we need to start working hard towards that. Now, the question I want to also just ask here is, if you plot South Africa compared to other countries on a number line, if you draw, or on a scale of 1 to 10, you draw South Africa on a scale of 1 to 10 with other countries around the world. You compare South Africa with the United States, you compare it with the UK, and you compare it on the other hand with Mexico. If you say Mexico is at number 10 in terms of the economic performance, their GDP growth was minus 0.1% in 2019. Whereas the United States GDP growth last year was 2.3%. The question I'm asking is, on this number line of 1 to 10, or the scale of 1 to 10, where would you plot South Africa? Now, the question is related to what has happened in this year. You will have heard from the Minister of Finance that the expected deficit this year is going to be around 304 billion rands based on the collection we would have received from our revenue. So we're going to have a shortfall of 304 billion rands in terms of the needs for our country. So we need to address the issues of the COVID-19, we need to address the issues of health, the issues of education, social development, and many other needs that our country have. But because of that, the deficit is going to be 304 billion rands for the year. Now, because of the poor performance of our economy, you'll recall that Moody and Fitch downgraded our economy earlier this year. And the minister announced that the increase in debt is going to soar to levels of 82%, which is about 4 trillion rands of GDP. That's what the Minister of Finance said in June this year. Now, on that number line that I talked about, if you plot Mexico at number 10, being the worst case, and you plot the United States and the UK at number 1, where would you plot South Africa? My answer would be that South Africa would be at number 5, between number 5 and number 6, almost halfway through between the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. The reason I put Mexico at number 10 is because if you look at Mexican economy, if you speak to any entrepreneur in Mexico, they will tell you that in their country, corruption, about 60% of them, they will tell you that corruption is part of doing business. These are entrepreneurs. They say to you that if you want to run an effective business in Mexico, 60% of the entrepreneurs will tell you that corruption is part of doing business. You can't run a business without corruption. And you will also read that between 2% and 10% of their GDP is lost to corruption. And even the cases that goes to court, less than 20% of them end up in guilty verdict. The other 80% they don't. The cases just get thrown out. They lose their cases. Less than 20% of their cases end in guilty verdict in corruption-related cases, as compared to about 90% in the United States. So that is a challenge that we don't want for our country. We don't want to get to that levels where 60% of our businessmen believe that it's normal to do business by corrupt means. So South Africa, I put it at number 5. If you look at the bond market or investment language, they call that the fallen angel state. So at number 5, we were somewhere at the higher level. Now we have fallen down. The investment experts, they call that a fallen angel state. So that's the state where we are now, and that's where we need to move out of for us to try and go back to where we were and try and do things positively in our country. So it is important that we prioritize and we do all we can to try and grow our economy for the betterment of everyone and for more and more employment for our people. Something I want to talk about as well is the youth entrepreneurship. In our country, most people, when they go to university, they've been taught that, when you finish university, you're going to work for Eskom, or you're going to work for Transnet, or you're going to work for Telkom. We need to start thinking out of the box. I encourage young people that they must think about forming their own SMMEs. Form your own small company, run your own business, and then you can still earn a living. You don't have to work for a big corporate. We're talking about 4IR these days. We talk about the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. Why can't we use that to try and form our own companies? I mentioned earlier that why today are we still relying on Twitter, which is an American product? Why are we still relying on Facebook, which is an American product? Why can't we have our own Facebook right here in our own country? We have got universities that are well respected around the world. University of Cape Town, Wits, and many others, University of Pretoria, Stellenbosch. Why can't out of those universities start developing our own social media technologies and softwares? Why can't we do that? And we can use that to generate more works for our people. We can use that to have SMMEs where our own people can start doing things for themselves. So I encourage people to think out of the box and say, we need to create more employment, we need to create more jobs, we need more entrepreneurs who will be able to do that. As I mentioned earlier, the unemployment rate in our country is sitting at around 30.1%. That's what the Stats SA says in Q1 of 2020. Now, that is very high. And you also see that if you look at the expanded unemployment number, it goes to around 30%, 35% rather. So it's actually a bit higher, the expanded definition of unemployment. So the 35% is a big number, and we need to work on reducing that. Something I also encourage young people is that the more you get educated, the better, because this number that is so high, most of the people who are unemployed are the people who do not have matric. So I encourage people to study beyond matric, go into tertiary, because if you look at the unemployment rate of people who are graduates, that number is sitting at 8.2%. So most of the people who are unemployed are not graduates. As I said, graduates' unemployment rate is 8.2%. The bulk of the unemployment rate is sitting with people who do not have matric. So people who has not gone further with their studies. So I encourage everyone to study hard, go beyond matric, do a diploma or do a degree, then you stand a better chance of being employed in our country. Another thing I wanted to mention as well is the issue of the budget versus the expenditure in our country. I briefly talked about it earlier. You will see that the revenue that we get and the expenditure that we get, the gap is widening. If you compare where we were in 2008 and where we are now, that gap is even wider. The gap is much, much wider than where it is now. So we need to come to a level where our expenditure and the revenue are close to one another. They say you must cut a trouser according to your size. In other words, we must fit our budget to within what we are able to collect. So it doesn't help for us to borrow more money, to go to IMF, to go to other institutions and borrow more money. That has to stop at some point. We can't keep on borrowing. You can't borrow money to pay debt. It doesn't help. It's not the best way of managing funds. Yes, at the moment it's difficult because of the COVID-19, but it's not a sustainable solution. So a sustainable solution is for us to be able to spend money based on what we can collect, our own revenue. That's what I would like to encourage us going forward as a country. All right. Another thing I want to just mention is that if you look at the South African budget, the bulk of the budget goes to education and training, followed by social development, and the third leg there is servicing debt. So in the next 3 years, in terms of the budgeting cycle, about 778 billion rand is just going to go on debt servicing. That is a lot of money for a country that is regarded as a developing country. That money, if this were not the funds that we have borrowed, that could be the money that we could be using for infrastructure development. It could be the money that we're using for other needs for our country. But because of the challenge that we face, we're still borrowing more money. And then because of borrowing, we still have lots of debt that we need to pay. So we need to find ways of getting out of borrowing and trying to start doing things based on what we can collect ourselves. Something else which is very important. I attended a conference in Cape Town in 2017. The conference is called the International Heavy Haul Association. At this conference, we had a keynote speaker. Her name was Dr. Cheryl Martin, who was a board member of the World Economic Forum. And this is what she said at the conference. She said that we have 21st century technologies being managed with 20th century thinking by 19th century institutions. Again, institutions. We need to build our institutions. We need to, start doing things better. We can't have these smart technologies that we have, but the institutions are still in the 19th century status. So we need to work on that. We need to improve our own institutions and start to have things that match the kind of knowledge, the kind of technologies that we have today. I'm just going to end with ethical leadership. In as much as we want to build our institutions, it's important that we also inculcate, we also nurture ethical leadership in our young people, in our leaders in the country. And I want to quote two prominent people in our country. The first one is the struggle icon Andrew Mlangen, who passed away in July this year, as we are all aware. And this is what he said in one of the statements that he said. He said that in judging our progress as individuals, we tend to concentrate on external factors such as one's own social position, influence and popularity, wealth and standard of education. But internal factors may be even more crucial in assessing one's development as a human being. These are honesty, sincerity, simplicity, humility, purity, generosity, absence of vanity, and readiness to serve your fellow man. It's important that this aspect is what we bring in our lives. It's not so much about accumulating assets, but it's about how you treat other people. Do you respect other people? Are you honest? Even if you gain money, but are you earning your money in an honest manner? So it's important that we challenge ourselves and we are able to do things much, much more honestly. And the other one is Dennis Goldberg, who passed away in April this year. And this is what he said. He said that we fought apartheid because the resources and the valuable minerals and the lives of our people were stolen by apartheid. And now we are stealing the very valuable things that our very constitution is supposed to defend. So people are stealing the resources that our struggle icons fought for, ourselves have fought for. These are the things that we don't want. So we need to start doing things ethically. So I want to challenge our young people to think about leadership, but think about leadership in an ethical sense. When you do things ethically, you sleep well at night. You don't worry because you know that what we are doing is the right thing. I just want to conclude with a quotation of one of the former United States President, Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover was in a similar position like me. He was the president of the Institute of Mining Engineers and also the former Federated American Engineering Societies. And this is what he said in his memoirs when he was describing the liabilities of engineering. He said that the great liability of the engineer compared to many of other professions is that his works are out in the open where all can see them. His acts, step by step, are in hard substance. He cannot bury his mistakes in the grave like doctors. He cannot argue them into thin air or blame the judge like the lawyers. He cannot, like the architects, cover his failures with trees and vines. He cannot, like the politicians, screen his shortcomings by blaming the opposition and hope that the people will forget. The engineer simply cannot deny that he did it. If his works do not work, he is damned. That's what Herbert Hoover says in 1961. With that, I want to thank you, and thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.
Mr. Marutla, on behalf of Protec, I'd like to thank you very much for gracing our occasion with your presence today, and thank you very much for taking the responsibility we've asked you to take over. So on behalf of Protec, this is our token of appreciation for your presence. And with that, we would like to say we thank SIS again for continuing the partnership with the organization. It's very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sir. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
All right.
Right, it's now my great pleasure to invite Mary Metcalf, Professor Mary Metcalf, to talk to you. Mary Metcalf has been a stalwart in higher education and learning for many years. She has an absolute passion for education, and she has a long list of successes, and I'm not going to go through them all, but currently she is the Director of Change and Management Programs to Improve Learning Outcomes, and has held various positions in higher education and been a stalwart in driving education across the field, and currently on the board of a number of institutions, including the South African Institute for Distance Education. So I welcome Mary, and I'm sure she will give you words of wisdom in this field of ours in terms of education. And Mary, thank you for attending and giving us your time. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you at your AGM in 2020. I am excited to be able to reconnect with Protec and to myself catch up with the excellent work that you're doing. I think Protec has changed in many ways since I last worked with the organization more than 20 years ago, I think. But it's good to reconnect and also to be able to greet your board member, Francis Faller, who walked the journey with me in the early days of Protec. When you invite someone to an AGM, I'm assuming that you're wanting that person to be able to give an address that not only acknowledges the excellent work that you're doing, but also perhaps brings new ideas and ideas that can challenge, ideas that can bring new directions to your thinking. So I want to start off by saying congratulations to Protec. I'm fascinated by what you're doing, by the way that you are being able to link the world of work to the development of young people, the way that you've been able in your fundraising strategy to be able to link particular projects to the branding of particular employers, which I think brings the resources of those potential employees into the work that you do. I'm excited by the excellence of your results, both in the NEC, but also in terms of making things happen in that difficult place of the transition between world of study and the world of work. I want to now start thinking about where we are, the broader context and the future. And I'm going to use the allegory of the starfish. Many of you will know this story, but for me it's a very powerful story for those of us who wish that our contributions will change the world, which is what I think drives many of us in the NGO space. So the parable or the allegory of starfish goes like this. There was a man walking on the beach with his daughter, and they came across a whole beach full of beached starfish that were busy gasping for breath on the sand, and all of which would be likely to die as the water was receding, and they wouldn't be able to access the oxygen that they needed to survive. So this man started picking up one starfish after the next and throwing it into the sea. And his daughter watched him and then said, "But Dad, why are you doing this? It's an overwhelming task. You're saving 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 20 starfish, but there's thousands on the beach. What difference are you making?" And the father replied to his daughter and said, "I hear you, but for each starfish it matters. It matters to that one." And I often think about that fable, that allegory, as we look at the work that we do in communities. And I want to congratulate Protec for the work that they're doing in getting 368 starfish matric passes in the last academic year. For each of those 368 learners, it mattered. You made a difference to their life, and you made a huge contribution in terms of the extended family networks of those individuals, and in terms of the contribution that they're going to be making in building our country in the world of work, in terms of creating, hopefully, a contribution to more inclusive society, a more inclusive economy. And the excellence of those starfish, that with those 368 NSC passes, you got 434 distinctions, I think is something that we can celebrate with each starfish. But for me, one of the challenges that I think excellent projects like this need to consider, need to apply themselves to, and use their expertise to address, is the challenge of the rest, the challenge of scale, the challenge of changing the system, the challenge of taking learnings into the system, so that in addition to reaching our beloved starfish, we are also able to impact on the system as a whole. And if we look at your world of impact, I'm wondering about the extent to which we are sufficiently recording, writing, sharing making sure that the lessons that Protec is accumulating are taken into the system as a whole, so that we reach beyond our starfish. And let's look at some of the challenges that you yourselves have identified in your annual report and what we know from the educational debates in the country. We know that there's a decline in maths participation. You highlighted that in your report. We know that that is a consequence of repeated failure, of more and more learners in the lower grades not covering enough of the core understanding outlined in the curriculum to build a strong foundation for the later years. We know that by grade 9, the percentage of children that are able to perform in maths is an abysmally low figure of below 10%. We know that that accumulated failure means that we have too many learners who lose hope in secondary school and who drop out. And they drop out slowly, they atrophy in their attendance because they are experiencing the constant humiliation of failure in their key adolescent years. And a lot of the failure is happening in the bewildering field of maths. How do we take our learning to address that problem? We also know that the level of understanding of mathematical concepts, particularly the algebraic functions after grade 10, are inadequately taken into the possibilities of proceeding into the world of work. Harambee is a massive undertaking. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work of Harambee, but it does a demand-side led introduction to the world of work by matching learners who already have an NSC with real work opportunities. And what they are finding is that even learners who have passed, perhaps at a minimal level, but who have passed the National Senior Certificate in Maths, are unable to do some of the basic arithmetic functioning that's required even for service sector shelf packing, working in a job which just requires basic arithmetic. So we have major challenges. We have learners, as I've indicated, who leave school prematurely without any formal certificate. If you don't get to grade 12, if you don't successfully complete the NSC certificate, you leave school with nothing. And we know that that's the majority. It's a good 70% of young learners who don't succeed in getting the NSC. So let's look at what Protec is learning, what Protec is mastering, what Protec has expertise to help the system to improve its performance overall. How do we continue with these projects which are focused, which are specific, which are starfish saving, but also share our knowledge? Firstly, I think that you have developed, from what I see in your annual report, excellent pedagogical processes of helping young learners catch up with schooling. You are taking young people who are showing massive deficits in terms of what they've understood in your key focus areas, and you are bringing them rapidly up to scale to be able to succeed and even excel in the National Senior Certificate. What are the secrets of that success? What is it that you're doing that we can take back into the system? How would you write that up in a way in which subject advisors, in which policymakers are able to say, if we can learn this from Protec, it will help us in the system as a whole? The second issue where I think your work is crucial and which you have successfully focused on is on the question of transitions. Transitions for young people are are a challenge. There's transitions that are very significant in the life of young people. Transitions between primary school and secondary school. Transitions between grade 9 and into grade 10. Transitions from matric into post-school study. Transitions into work. And I suspect that a reflection on everything that you've learnt by doing, everything you've learnt by interacting, everything you've learnt by being with young people, would probably harvest huge insights which need to be supported by the system. The third area where I think your contribution is so crucial is in the work that the DBE is doing, and hopefully, despite COVID, is going to continue with the transition between the end of grade 9 and 10, 11 and 12. And the introduction of the General Education Certificate, which will pave the way for the differentiated system after grade 12, where the DBE is talking about introducing an academic, a technical and an occupational paths that learners will be able to follow. Now, this is the thinking behind the grade 9 certificate. I think it's a crucial innovation, because we do need young learners to be able to leave school, if they are going to drop out, with at least a grade 9 certificate. But we also need them to be able to look at genuine opportunities in the technical and the occupational sphere, instead of, at the moment, having the single-minded focus on getting an academic national senior certificate. I think that your orientation towards the technological, which comes from your history and the way that this arose as a project of engineers, is that introduction of the technical stream within the post-grade 9 learning menu is something that is going to be very important for the country. And the expertise that you have in understanding the teaching of the technological, I think, will be crucial for how that is developed. What can you do in terms of reflecting, in terms of informing, in terms of publicly putting your work out there, so that the system as a whole can learn from your excellent contribution? So my challenge is the starfish. I love it. But what do you do beyond that pool to share your learning? How do you share your own monitoring and evaluation? How do you share your own courage? Because in reading some of the reports, I've seen high levels of courage. I've seen in the teacher support project, and I think that's in Mamelodi and Mpumalanga, I'm not sure if I've remembered correctly. But I was fascinated that whoever leads that project, I think it's someone called David, actually had the courage to say what we conceptualized in terms of teacher support was not matched by what was achievable in terms of what schools need. That takes courage. But why you decided to make that shift implies that you have insights into the functioning of schools and how they need to be supported that must be shared. So my challenge to Protec is to say, how do you take that contribution? How do you take that learning? How do you present it in a way in which it becomes available to the system as a whole? How do you do that strategically? How do you do that so it doesn't detract from your main focus of identifying young learners, supporting them, helping them with the transition into post-school education and training, supporting them in that, as well as supporting people into the world of work? The value of all of that is in the learning that it gives to the system. I think my last challenge at the time of COVID is if there are any ways in which your knowledge of how to support young people and what kind of pedagogy works can be applied to the class of 2020 generally and broadly. I see in your report that you've developed a wide range of learning material. Are there ways in which, where you work with officials and with schools on the ground, you can make that material available? Because the class of 2020, I think, is a major challenge to the country, to have so many young people who feel that they haven't been given a fair chance to prepare for this, for many, life-making or breaking opportunity to write. So many haven't had access to the online material. They haven't had access to learning spaces within home and community where it's been possible to do the work they would like to do. How can you use your resources in the areas that you work so that teachers and schools and districts where you are know that your learning about how to support learners into a successful national senior certificate they can benefit from? So thank you for giving me the opportunity of being at your AGM. Thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to see the work that you're doing. Congratulations. And sterkte. Good luck going forward into 2021. Thank you.
Mary, thank you so much for spending so much time with us. I know you're a busy lady, and we really appreciate your message. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was lovely to be with you.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we move to the point on the agenda for confirmation of directors. This is not an elective year, so I will read out the directors as they stand, and could you please note your confirmation of these directors in the chat box. Stephen Natleng, Mike Trulock, Balin Mudley, Professor Francis Fuller, Reggie Zigalala, Jones Motlisan, and Francois Adrian. If you could confirm those directors standing for this year in the chat box, please. Our following item on the agenda is the confirmation of auditors for the current year. The auditors, as you see in your pack, are PKF Chartered Accountants. In terms of the provisions, this is their 5th year, and we would like to propose that the auditors be accepted for this, the last year in their cycle. For that, if you could please place your confirmation. Could I have a proposer and a seconder to confirm that in the chat box, please? Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our annual general meeting for this year, 2019-20. Thank you very much for attending. It has been a watershed year in terms of the format of the AGM, and many people are doing this way with the current situation. We would love your feedback. Please jot that feedback to the CEO, Balin Mudley, at any time. And I hope that this meeting has been informational and that you have enjoyed our guest speakers. Thank you once again to all of them and to everybody involved. We wish you a good day going forward. Thank you.